We have a long list of topics, but it's all going to be around how to trace an image. We finally have the skills and we're getting a little closer to completing a marquetry project. Before we start tracing, I want to get my views and my layers set up. So just make sure you're in small object inches. We will open the top view, and then over in the layers section, there's a few items I want to change. So the very first one, the default, I'm going to rename this to image. And then the next layer, I'm gonna name it as a tracing. Third layer, I will name it as parts. And then under parts, I want to have some sub layers as well. To add a sub layer, it's this second icon here. If I click that, I'll have my first part. Let's label this walnut. Another part here, I'll label it cherry. Another part I'll call maple. Now you see, when I'm in this main layer, if I hit sublayer, it creates a sublayer under that. But if I stayed on walnut and I created a sublayer, it would create a sublayer within walnut, which is not what I wanted. So instead, if I'm in this sublayer, to create another layer, I click the new layer icon. A little bit of a nuance, but you'll get the hang of it. The next layer, I'm going to rename this as rendering, and then under rendering, I'm going to do the same layers. I'm going to do walnut, cherry, maple. The next layer, I'm going to label that as notes, and my last layer, I'm going to rename this as scratch. I'm going to change some of the colors I have here as well. So image I can leave as black. Tracing I'll leave as red. I think that's easy to see. For the parts, the main parts, I'm going to keep that as black. But for walnut, I'll change this to brown. For cherry, I'll change this to a pink. Maple, I'll change it to a light gray. The rendering layers, I won't worry about that for now. For the notes layer, I like to leave this as a purple. And scratch, I'll leave as white. So that took a little bit of work to set up. To save ourselves some time, I'm going to save this as a template. So the next time I can just open this and go straight to work. To save it as a template, go to the top left, click on File, about a third of the way down, Save as Template. And this template, I'm going to call it Marquetry and Inlay. Now let's close Rhino. We'll open it up again, and we'll see in this list here, I should have a marquetry and inlay template that I just created. When I open that, I'm in the top view, and then I have all my layers already set. Let's start tracing an image now. I'm going to type in a command called picture, hit enter. That opens up my file explorer. Then you can find the image that you want to import. Click open. I'm going to start from the bottom left corner, the origin, and then I'll drag it out. And you can drag it to whatever size you want. The most important thing though is that this image is on my image layer. Now I'm going to click into the tracing layer, and while that's active, I can now lock that image layer, which means I can no longer move this image around, which is really important. For example, if I had this unchecked and I'm trying to trace an image, I could accidentally click on this picture and then start moving that around, which can be quite annoying. So make sure you always have that image layer locked. It's also nice to have your image on a separate layer, because when you're done tracing, you can hit the light bulb, the image goes away, and you can just work off your tracing. Now that I have the tracing image active, let's zoom in on this part. I will just work on the head here. Let's start with interpret curve. I'll hit T, right click, and then you see how this kind of snaps back here. That's because I have grid snap on. So I can hit F9, grid snap turns off, or at the very bottom, you can just click to turn grid snap off. And I'll start at this point here. I don't need to go too detailed. I'm just going to do a quick tracing around this stuck here. I'll end there. So to end it, I right-clicked, and then I right-clicked again to activate my interp curve. That way I can come to a crisp point for here. As I complete this tracing, you may notice two things. One, that red outline is a little hard to see, and two, there are some spots where I don't conform as nicely as I want. So let's work on the first thing. Let's see if we can make that red line a little more visible. I'm going to go back to my image layer. I'll unlock this, click on that image. Once I do, it unlocks some features. So back in the layers icon, I have to go to my properties panel. So that's the rainbow color wheel you see here. If I click on that, these extra icons unlock. If I don't have my image selected, you don't have those extra properties. So make sure that's selected when that happens. Click on the toothpaste or this little paint tube here, the second icon. Once this finally loads, we can look towards the bottom object transparency. I'm going to drag this across to 50%. Immediately you can see that the image has faded a bit, making your tracing a lot easier to see. Once you're happy with that, go back to layers, lock that image icon, make sure you're back in tracing before you continue. So the second thing we want to fix is that the tracing doesn't follow uniformly. To edit this, I'm going to click on here, and now I can edit the nodes. The nodes are all these little white dots that you see. To edit the node, I need to click on that node, and then a gumball appears. And then I can manipulate this so I can make it form better to my shape. If I look at this line here, I want this line to follow this curve and then introduce a second curve. But this node kind of limits the shape that I can have. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert another control point, and then hopefully that allows me to introduce the shape that I want. So I'm going to type in InsertControlPoint, enter. I'm going to select a curve, and then I'm going to add a control point here, add a control point there. I will right click to execute that. Click back onto this line. You can see that here is my original control point. I'll put that closer to the middle, and then one in front of it and one behind it. And now you can see that this line follows this curve a little more uniformly. The opposite may be true as well. Let's say I have too many control points. In order to delete a control point, I usually just click the points that I want and I will delete them one at a time. Or you can use the selection window, select a grouping of them, and delete the control points. There's a command called RemoveControlPoint that does the same. If I enter the command, with that active now, I can just click on the control point to remove it. That method just removes one point at a time, so I usually don't use that and just click and delete the points I want. This image is pretty simple to trace, but let's say we had something more complicated. There are tools that are built into Rhino that can give you a little bit of a leg up. So what I'm going to do now is introduce the Vectorize command. To use Vectorize, we have to install it first. So the first thing you need to do is open up Package Manager. So type that in, hit enter. Under the search bar, type in Vectorize. Two of these pop up. I like to use the second one. So highlight that, and then on the bottom right here, click install, install. Once that's done, you can hit OK. Let's try Vectorize command now. I'm going to type in Vectorize. When I hit enter, the file explorer pops up. I'm going to click on that same image again. Now it comes up with this Vectorize window where I can input my various options. Let me zoom out. You can see that this is the tracing that came out, right? It comes out quite clean. It's actually almost exactly what I want. I won't change any of these items except for include border. I'll turn that off and hit OK. Now that Vectorize feature, what it does is it detects different shades of color and it kind of guesses where a border is. So for the image that I started out with, which was basically a drawing, a vectored drawing, it was really easy to detect those borders and give you a really great tracing. If I try to use Vectorize on a normal picture file, it won't come out quite as well. So for example, let's take a look at this lotus flower. Now let's try and vectorize that flower. you can see that it has a really hard time determining where the edges of that flower is. We can change the threshold a little bit, and that's a little better. Ideally, what you would expect Vectorize to do is to give you a perfect tracing of all of these petals, but Vectorize, it's just taking a guess. So when there's 500 different colors in here, it's really difficult for it to distinguish what that boundary is. So Vectorize really is only good for files that already look like a logo, that are black and white, or are high resolution. Coming back to this duck, let's get this back to a workable size, because again, this is small inches, so this duck is huge right now. I want it somewhere closer to maybe a 10 by 10 at most. To do that, there's two ways. One, I can have all of this highlighted, and then Gumball appears. This middle window, if I hold Shift, I can drag that back and forth and bring it to a scale that I want. But this kind of just eyeballs that scale. If I want it precisely scaled, what I will do is first draw a rectangle. 10, enter, 10, enter. So now I know this rectangle is 10 by 10. I'm now going to select my duck. If I want the height of this duck to be 10, I will first click the white circle here, relocate Gumball. I'll bring it to the bottom of the duck and then right click. Now with it relocated there, I can click and drag that white point and bring it to the bottom of my box. From here I can actually see that this toe is the lowest point. So I'll reselect this, locate Gumball to that bottom toe, and then bring it to the bottom of the box. Next, I highlight it all. Scale 2D is the command we're going to use. Hit enter. I'm going to click that bottom toe. I'm going to click the top of the chick, and then drag that up to my box. So now from this tippy toe to the very top of this duck's head is 10 inches. That is an easy way to get a scale. If I'm doing a manual tracing, coming back here, I can also bring in the picture to be the size that I want. So I'll type in rectangle again, 10 by 10. I enter picture, enter, bring in the duck. So for the duck picture, I'll bring to the bottom left corner, drag that up to the top right corner. Now I know that this duck is within a 10 by 10 frame, including the background. So there are several different ways to trace an image and to bring it to the scale that you want. Let's work on this duck a little more. I'm going to delete this boundary. If I click on the duck, you see the whole thing is highlighted and there's no control points or there's no nodes I can edit. What I want to do is, with that selected, I'm going to type in ungroup. Now if I click off of that and click back on, these are now individual parts. So for example, now I can delete that outside boundary. Maybe I don't want these details in the goggles and I don't want this detail in the beak. So that way you can really easily manipulate objects that have been vectorized for you. For our purposes, let's talk about manually tracing something and then editing that to be a marquetry project. So I already started with this duck. I'm going to go back in my tracing and let me complete this tracing. Let's do the glasses here. You can see my snap is kind of getting in the way, but if I zoom in close enough, I can bypass that just a little bit. I'm not going for precise here, just something quick and dirty to show you how this can work. Okay, I don't like how this is popped up, so let me see if I can bring that down. I need another control point here, so insert control point right there and there. I can click back in, edit this so it follows within the goggles, within the glasses a little better here. Okay, a little messy, but good enough. Now let me trace these lenses. With this first lens traced, instead of tracing a second one, I want to duplicate it over. So I'm sure all of us are familiar with Control C, Control V for copy and paste. Rhino has an easier way to do that. If I have that object selected, I can hold down Alt, and then if I move it in any way, it creates a duplicate of it. So if I don't hold Alt, I just move that around. But if I hold Alt, I click and drag, wherever I let go, my duplicate lands and the original stays there. Once I have it here, I can do a little node editing to bring it to a shape that I like. Now let's take a look how that looks. I'm gonna hide the image now, give me an idea of whether or not I like the direction it's going, and I think it's okay. Last thing I'll do is I'll trace the mouth. I don't want it touching, so I'm just gonna bring it down a little further. All right, we'll call that good. Coming in here, we're gonna do some trim because I want the glasses to be at the front. So I'll have all of this selected, Control and T. That way I can click into the pieces of the line that I don't want to see. Okay, once I'm done, I'll right click to execute that command. I'll left click, and then this is the chick face that I'm left with. So I have my image, I have my tracing layer. I need to start creating the parts now. The first thing I'll do is I'll select the walnut layer, have this completely selected. I'm going to type in CB, which activates curve boolean. For the parts that I want to be walnut, let's do the glasses themselves of walnut. I'll click into there, right click. So now that part is walnut. Let's go to cherry. I'll hit CB again, do the head as cherry. I'm going to click and drag that over down to cherry. Go into maple. Let's do the glasses as maple. Now I still need to do the beak, but following this color scheme, I think I need one more component. So I'll add one more layer here. Let's call this bloodwood. I'll activate that layer, have this selected, curve boolean, click on the beak, and then bring it over. So here I have the tracing that I completed. This part is going to be cut out in walnut. These parts are going to be cut out in cherry. This is going to be cut out in maple and then inserted into the glasses here. And then this beak is going to be cut out in bloodwood and then inserted into the face here. So this is close to being laser ready. I would say we're about 80% there. There's still some mirroring and offsets we need to do, but I usually like to do that in Lightburn, and I'll show you that in the next video. For now, let's see how we can export this as an SVG and then bring it into Lightburn. First, let's just save this file as a Rhino file. I'll go to File, Save. If I come down to the bottom, file name, let's call this marquetry duck. Save as type. If I click this drop down, you can see that Rhino is backwards compatible. So I have Rhino 8 and I can save it as any previous edition. Now there are certain circumstances where you may want to save as a lower model version. For example, at Red Rocks, the computer lab uses Rhino 7. So if you save this as a Rhino 8 file, you will not be able to open it on those computers. But worry not, even if you have a Rhino 8, there are converters online that'll resave it as a different file type, but is one extra step to be aware of. So I'm going to save this as Rhino 8 model. Now I want to save the SVG. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. It's a vector file, which is exactly what Lightburn and other programs like it need to use. Going back to File, Save As. This time, with this drop down, I'm just going to type S. That brings me to Scalable Vector Graphics. I'll have that selected. I'm going to save. When you do that, it brings up an additional window, the Export SVG window. There's a few key entries you need to have in here. One is you need to have everything visible. So right now, the way I have this positioned, you can't see everything. An easy way to do that, I'll change this to portrait. That helps a little bit, but I still have the duck face on this side that I can't see. So I'm going to change the file size. I'll just make my file paper a little larger. The next item I want to go down is view and output scale. Make sure you're on the top view. If I go into perspective view, you can see that it changes what's going to be output as a vector. So I'll make sure you're in the top view. As for the items below, I would check mark extents. That way the entirety of your graphics are going to be exported. And at the bottom, make sure your scale is 1:1. So if I did all that work to make this a 4x4 inch size marquetry project, but I don't have the scale correct, this could easily be a lot smaller or a lot larger when I export it into Lightburn. With that ready, I will click save. That's it for this video. We've gotten this graphic to a point where about 80% ready to start doing some laser work. I suggest you review my Lightburn tutorial videos, and I'll bring this example in there as well under the marquetry section. Thank you.